In a small, quiet town surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, Lieutenant Sarah Reeves was known as one of the most skilled K-9 handlers in the military. Her reputation within her unit was unmatched. She had trained two Belgian Malinois, Apollo and Athena, to perform tasks that seemed almost superhuman. From detecting hidden explosives to tracking down fugitives in dense terrain, her dogs were not just pets. They were highly disciplined partners who worked seamlessly with her. Despite her impressive track record, however, Sarah often faced challenges. Outside the military base, people in the town didn't always understand what she did or how much dedication it took to train animals like Apollo and Athena. Sarah loved her job, but she also knew that being a woman in a field dominated by men came with its own set of hurdles. She had grown used to skeptical looks and whispered comments whenever she walked into public spaces wearing her uniform. Some people assumed she was only there because of quotas or special treatment, completely unaware of the years of hard work and sacrifice she had put into becoming an expert handler. But Sarah didn't let those opinions bother her too much. What mattered to her was the bond she shared with Apollo and Athena, and the fact that together they made a difference every single day. On this particular sunny afternoon, Sarah decided to take Apollo and Athena out for some exercise along the forest trails near the edge of town. These trails were perfect for training runs. They were secluded, challenging, and provided plenty of opportunities to practice commands in different environments. The weather was warm and the air smelled fresh, filled with the scent of pine needles and wildflowers. As Sarah jogged alongside her dogs, she felt at peace, enjoying the simple pleasure of being outdoors with her trusted companions. When she reached the trailhead where the path began, Sarah noticed a group of bikers gathered nearby. Their motorcycles were parked haphazardly, blocking part of the entrance to the trail. They were loud, boisterous, and clearly enjoying themselves. Their leather jackets gleamed in the sunlight, adorned with patches and insignias that hinted at their tough guy personas. One man stood out among them, a burly figure with tattoos covering his arms and a scowl etched across his face. He appeared to be the leader of the group, commanding attention with his booming voice and confident demeanor. As Sarah approached with Apollo and Athena trotting obediently beside her, the leader turned his head and spotted her. His eyes narrowed slightly as he took in her appearance, the camouflage-patterned workout gear, the military-grade boots, and the leashes held firmly in her hands. A smirk spread across his face and he nudged one of his friends, nodding toward Sarah. "Well, well," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Look what we've got here. A little girl playing soldier?" The other bikers burst into laughter, their voices echoing through the trees. One of them chimed in, "Yeah, I bet those dogs are more scared of squirrels than actual threats." Another added, "Probably just lap dogs dressed up to look tough." The insults kept coming, each one more mocking than the last. To them, Sarah was nothing more than a curiosity, an oddity to be ridiculed for daring to step into their territory. But Sarah remained unfazed. She'd heard it all before, and she knew better than to let their words get under her skin. Instead, she focused on keeping Apollo and Athena calm. Both dogs were alert, sensing the tension in the air. Though they were trained to respond to commands without hesitation, Sarah gave them subtle signals to stay relaxed and avoid reacting to the bikers' taunts. Still, it was hard to ignore the sting of disrespect, not for herself, but for her dogs. Apollo and Athena weren't just tools or props. They were living, breathing members of her team, and they deserved recognition for their incredible abilities. The leader of the bikers stepped closer, his boots crunching against the gravel beneath him. He crossed his arms over his chest and tilted his head, studying Sarah with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "So, what exactly do you think you're doing out here?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Looking for lost cats? Or maybe trying to impress someone with your fancy dog tricks?" Sarah stopped walking and met his gaze directly. There was no fear in her expression, only quiet confidence. "We're training," she replied simply, her her voice steady and composed. "And if you don't mind, we'd like to continue." For a moment, the biker seemed taken aback by her calm response. Perhaps he had expected her to shrink away or lash out defensively. But when she didn't rise to his bait, he doubled down, determined to rattle her composure. "Training, huh?" he scoffed. "What kind of training could possibly prepare those mutts for real action? You sure they won't run off squealing at the first sign of trouble?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she tightened her grip on the leashes and gave Apollo and Athena another reassuring signal. The dogs responded immediately, sitting perfectly, still by her side despite the growing tension around them. Their presence alone exuded discipline and control, qualities that even the most cynical observer couldn't deny. Yet the bikers continued to mock her, refusing to acknowledge the skill and effort required to train such remarkable animals. Despite the frustration bubbling beneath the surface, Sarah chose to ignore their jibes and focus on the task at hand. She reminded herself that proving her worth wasn't about winning arguments. It was about demonstrating results. And though she didn't know it yet, the opportunity to showcase her dog's capabilities would come sooner than she expected. For now, she simply moved past the bikers, continuing down the trail with Apollo and Athena leading the way. Little did the bikers realize their arrogance was about to lead to a lesson none of them would soon forget. After brushing off the bikers' taunts and continuing down the trail, Sarah focused on her original plan, giving Apollo and Athena a good workout while practicing their agility and obedience. The forest trail was perfect for this kind of training. It had uneven terrain, fallen branches, and narrow paths that required quick thinking and precise movements. As she walked, Sarah gave the dogs various commands, watching as they executed each one flawlessly. Apollo sprinted ahead to scout the area, his nose twitching as he sniffed the ground for any scents. Athena stayed close to Sarah, her sharp eyes, scanning the surroundings for anything unusual. The sound of revving engines soon faded into the background as Sarah and her dogs ventured deeper into the woods. But no matter how hard she tried to concentrate, the memory of the bikers' mocking laughter lingered in her mind. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated her or dismissed her abilities because of her gender, but it still bothered her. Not for her own sake, but because it reflected a lack of respect for the dedication and hard work that went into what she did. Every day she trained tirelessly with Apollo and Athena, pushing herself and her dogs to be the best they could be. To have all of that effort reduced to a joke by people who didn't understand felt unfair, not just to her, but to her loyal companions as well. As Sarah rounded a bend in the trail, she noticed something glinting in the sunlight up ahead. Curious, she slowed her pace and motioned for Apollo to investigate. The dog bounded forward, his tail wagging with excitement, and came back moments later holding an empty beer can in his mouth. Sarah frowned as she took the can from him. It was fresh, still damp with condensation, and smelled strongly of alcohol. Someone had clearly tossed it aside recently. Her gaze drifted toward the direction they had come from, where the bikers were parked near the trailhead. She sighed, shaking her head. Littering in such a pristine environment was frustrating enough, but combined with their earlier mockery, it only added fuel to her simmering irritation. Determined not to let the incident ruin her training session, Sarah tossed the can into a nearby trash bag she always carried during outings. She knelt beside Apollo and Athena, praising them both for their keen senses before issuing another command. "Let's keep moving," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. The dogs perked up immediately, ready to follow wherever she led. But, as fate would have it, peace didn't last long. Just as Sarah and her dogs reached a clearing surrounded by tall trees, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines grew louder. Moments later, the bikers appeared at the edge of the clearing, their machines roaring like angry beasts. They skidded to a halt, kicking up clouds of dirt and leaves. The leader dismounted and strode forward, his boots crunching against the forest floor. His expression was smug, as if he'd been waiting for this moment to confront her again. Well, he said, crossing his arms over his chest. Looks like we caught up to you. Didn't think you'd get far with those mutts dragging behind." His friends laughed loudly, echoing his jeers. One of them leaned casually against his bike, twirling a set of keys around his finger. "Yeah, I bet they're scared of their own shadows," he chimed in, grinning wickedly. Sarah straightened up, her posture rigid but composed. She didn't respond to their insults, instead focusing on keeping Apollo and Athena calm. Both dogs stood silently by her side, their ears pricked forward as they watched the bikers intently. Though they remained still, there was an undeniable tension radiating from them, a quiet energy that signaled they were ready to act at a moment's notice. To anyone familiar with working dogs, it was clear that these animals were far from ordinary. But the bikers, blinded by their arrogance, failed to recognize the warning signs. The leader stepped closer, his tone shifting from mocking to challenging. "You really think those dogs are worth all the hype? Prove it." He gestured toward his group. "We've got bikes. Let's see if your precious pets can even keep up." Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the challenge despite herself. She knew Apollo and Athena were more than capable of handling whatever the bikers threw at them, but she hesitated. Engaging in a confrontation with strangers, even obnoxious ones, wasn't part of her plan for the day. Still, the bikers' constant belittling grated on her nerves. If they wanted proof of her dog's abilities, maybe it was time to give them exactly what they asked for. Before she could respond, the leader made a move that sealed his fate. With a smirk, he grabbed an empty soda bottle from his pocket and hurled it directly at Sarah. The object whizzed past her head, narrowly, missing her ear, and landed with a thud on the ground behind her. The gesture was meant to intimidate, to provoke a reaction, but it had the opposite effect. Instead of flinching or backing down, Sarah's resolve hardened. Enough was enough. In an instant, Apollo let out a low growl, his lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. Athena mirrored his stance, her body coiled like a spring, ready to pounce. The playful energy they had displayed earlier vanished, replaced by a fierce intensity that sent chills down the spines of everyone present. Even the bikers seemed to pause, their bravado faltering for the first time. Sarah held up a hand, signaling her dogs to stand down. For now, she turned her attention back to the bikers, her voice steady and commanding. "If you want a demonstration," she said, meeting the leader's gaze without blinking, "then you'll get one. But don't say I didn't warn you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promise. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. For the first time since their encounter began, doubt crept into their expressions. They had underestimated Sarah and her dogs, dismissing them as weak and insignificant. Now, they were about to discover just how wrong they had been. With a flick of her wrist, Sarah issued a new command. Apollo and Athena sprang into action, their powerful legs propelling them forward with breathtaking speed. The bikers scrambled to mount their motorcycles, shouting nervously as the dogs closed the distance between them. What happened next would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved, a lesson in humility that none of them would soon forget. Sarah's voice rang out clearly, cutting through the chaos as she issued her next command. "Apollo, Athena, show them what you're made of." Her tone was calm but firm, leaving no room for hesitation. In an instant, the two Belgian Malinois sprang into action, their sleek bodies moving with precision and purpose. The bikers, who had been laughing and jeering just moments earlier, suddenly found themselves face to face with a force they hadn't anticipated. The leader of the group shouted something unintelligible to his friends as he scrambled onto his motorcycle. He revved the engine, sending a cloud of dust spiraling into the air, and took off down the trail. His companions followed suit, their bikes roaring like thunder as they sped away. To them, speed was their greatest advantage. They were on powerful machines, capable of reaching high velocities in seconds. How could mere dogs possibly catch up? But Apollo and Athena weren't ordinary dogs. Years of rigorous training had honed their skills to perfection. They were built for agility, endurance, and unmatched focus. As the bikers disappeared around the first bend in the trail, Sarah gave one last signal, and her dogs bolted after them without missing a beat. Their paws pounded against the ground, creating a rhythmic thud that echoed through the forest. Within seconds, they were closing the gap between themselves and the fleeing motorcycles. The bikers, initially confident in their ability to outrun, the dogs began to realize they had underestimated their pursuers. Apollo led the charge, his lean frame weaving effortlessly through obstacles. Fallen branches, rocks, and uneven terrain posed no challenge to him. He leapt over them with ease, never breaking stride. Athena wasn't far behind, her movements mirroring Apollo's as she navigated the trail with equal grace and determination. Together, they formed a formidable team, working in perfect harmony as they chased down their targets. As the chase unfolded, the bikers' bravado started to crumble. One of them glanced back over his shoulder and nearly lost control of his bike when he saw how close Apollo was. The dog's piercing eyes locked onto him, unwavering and intense. Panic set in as the biker swerved wildly, trying to put more distance between himself and the relentless canine. But Apollo didn't falter. If anything, he seemed to gain even more speed, his powerful legs propelling him forward like a streak of lightning. Meanwhile, Athena focused on another rider farther ahead. She zigzagged through the underbrush using her sharp instincts to anticipate where the biker would go next. When he veered off the main path in an attempt to lose her, she adjusted her course instantly, cutting him off before he could escape. The biker skidded to a stop, his tires kicking up dirt as he stared at the dog now standing directly in his way. Athena's hackles were raised, and her low growl sent a shiver down his spine. He froze, unsure of what to do next, while Athena held her ground, her gaze unrelenting. Back on the main trail, the leader of the group realized his plan was falling apart. His friends were dropping like flies, and he could hear the sound of paws pounding closer with each passing second. Desperation fueled his actions as he pushed his motorcycle to its limits, speeding recklessly through the forest. But even his fastest efforts couldn't shake Apollo, who was now so close that the biker could feel the rush of wind as the dog darted past him. In a final, desperate attempt to evade capture, the leader took a sharp turn onto a narrow side path. It was steep and treacherous, lined with loose gravel and jagged rocks. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually escape, but fate had other plans. Apollo anticipated the move and adjusted his trajectory accordingly, bounding after the biker with incredible speed. The motorcycle hit a patch of loose stones and fishtailed violently, throwing the leader off balance. With a startled yell, he tumbled off his bike and landed hard on the ground, rolling several feet before coming to a painful stop. By the time Sarah arrived on foot, the scene was already unfolding exactly as she'd predicted. All 5 bikers had been stopped in their tracks, their once mighty motorcycles abandoned or wrecked along the trail. Some sat slumped against trees, nursing minor injuries and looking thoroughly defeated. Others stood frozen, staring wide-eyed at Apollo and Athena, who circled them with quiet authority. There was no aggression in the dog's demeanor. They didn't need to bark or bare their teeth to make their point. Their sheer presence was enough to command respect. Sarah walked calmly into the clearing, her boots crunching softly against the forest floor. She surveyed the situation with a mixture of satisfaction and professionalism. While part of her wanted to gloat about proving the bikers wrong, she knew better than to stoop to their level. Instead, she approached the leader, who was still lying, on the ground, clutching his arm and wincing in pain. Kneeling beside him, she offered a hand to help him up. "You okay?" she asked, her tone neutral but not unkind. The man hesitated for a moment before accepting her assistance, muttering a quiet, "Thanks," as he struggled to his feet. Once he was upright, Sarah turned to address the entire group. "I told you my dogs are trained professionals," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "They're not here to play games. And neither am I." The bikers exchanged nervous glances, their earlier arrogance completely gone. One of them spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. We didn't mean any harm," he stammered. "We were just messing around." Sarah crossed her arms over her chest and fixed him with a piercing stare. "Messing around doesn't include littering, throwing objects at people, or mocking someone because of their gender. You disrespected me, sure, but you also disrespected these dogs. They're soldiers, just like I am. They deserve your respect, too." Her words hung heavy in the air, silencing the group completely. No one dared to argue or make excuses. They knew they had crossed a line, and now they were paying the price. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. The humiliation of being outmatched by two highly trained dogs was a blow to their egos, but it was also a wake-up call. For the first time, they understood the depth of skill and dedication required to train animals like Apollo and Athena. As Sarah called her dogs back to her side, giving them affectionate pats and words of praise, the bikers watched in stunned silence. Apollo and Athena returned to her obediently, their tails wagging despite the intensity of the chase. To anyone watching, it was clear that the bond between handler and dogs was unbreakable, a partnership forged through years of trust, patience, and mutual respect. With the situation under control, Sarah decided it was time to leave. She retrieved her trash bag from earlier and picked up any remaining litter left behind by the bikers. Then, with a final glance at the group, she turned and began walking back toward the trailhead, her dogs trotting happily beside her. The bikers stayed where they were, too shaken to move, as the sound of Sarah's footsteps faded into the distance. Though the encounter had been brief, its impact was profound. The bikers had come to the forest seeking fun and adventure, but instead they had received a lesson in humility and a newfound appreciation for the power of teamwork, discipline, and respect. As for Sarah, she walked away knowing she had done her job, not just as a soldier, but as someone who believed in standing up for what was right, no matter the odds. As Sarah and her dogs continued their pursuit of the bikers, the forest trail became a blur of motion and sound. The roar of motorcycle engines mixed with the rhythmic pounding of paws against the earth, creating an adrenaline-fueled symphony that echoed through the trees. Apollo and Athena moved like shadows, their sleek bodies weaving effortlessly between obstacles as they closed in on their targets. For the bikers, who had initially dismissed the dogs as mere pets, the reality of the situation was sinking in, fast, and it wasn't pretty. The first biker to fall victim to the dog's relentless pursuit was the one who had tried to veer off the main path. His attempt to lose Athena by taking a sharp detour into thicker underbrush only made things worse. The narrow trail he chose was cluttered with fallen branches and uneven terrain, making it nearly impossible for his heavy motorcycle to navigate smoothly. As he struggled to maintain control, Athena appeared out of nowhere, cutting him off with precision timing. She planted herself firmly in front of him, her stance unwavering and her eyes locked onto his. The biker skidded to a stop, his tires kicking up dirt as he stared at the dog blocking his way. For a moment there was silence, just the sound of his engine idling and Athena's low growl reverberating through the air. The man froze, unsure of what to do next. He glanced around nervously, hoping one of his friends might come to his rescue, but no one was in sight. All he could see was Athena, standing tall and unyielding, daring him to make another move. Realizing he had no choice but to surrender, he turned off his bike and raised his hands in defeat. Okay, he shouted, his voice trembling. "I'm done. Just call her off." Athena didn't need to be called off. She simply stood her ground, watching as the biker dismounted and backed away slowly, his face pale with fear. Once she was certain he posed no further threat, she trotted back toward the main trail to rejoin Sarah and Apollo. Her job was done, for now. Meanwhile, Apollo had his sights set on another rider farther ahead. This particular biker seemed determined to outrun the dog at any cost, pushing his motorcycle to its limits as he sped down the winding trail. but Apollo was faster, more agile, and utterly relentless. Every time the biker thought he had gained some distance, Apollo would surge forward, closing the gap with astonishing speed. The biker's panic grew with each passing second, his confidence crumbling as he realized escape was futile. In a final, desperate bid to shake Apollo, the biker took a sharp turn onto a steep incline littered with loose rocks and debris. It was a risky maneuver, even for someone experienced, but desperation clouded his judgment. As he gunned the engine and climbed higher, Apollo adjusted his course seamlessly, bounding up the slope with ease. The biker glanced over his shoulder just in time to see Apollo leap into the air, clearing a large rock with effortless grace. That was the last straw. Overwhelmed by fear, the biker lost control of his bike, which fishtailed violently before, tipping over. He tumbled off, landing hard on the ground and rolling several feet before coming to a painful stop. Apollo reached him moments later, standing over him with quiet authority. There was no aggression in his demeanor, just a calm, commanding presence that left no room for argument. The biker groaned, clutching his side as he looked up at the dog looming above him. All right, he muttered, holding up his hands in surrender. You win." By this point, the remaining bikers were scattering in every direction, their earlier bravado completely shattered. One by one, they fell victim to Apollo and Athena's superior skills. Some crashed their bikes while attempting reckless maneuvers. Others simply gave up, too terrified to keep going. Within minutes, all 5 bikers were either sprawled on the ground or leaning against trees, nursing minor injuries and looking thoroughly defeated. When Sarah finally caught up to them, the scene was chaotic but controlled. Apollo and Athena patrolled the area, ensuring none of the bikers tried anything foolish. Their presence alone was enough to keep everyone in line, even without Sarah issuing additional commands. She surveyed the group with a mixture of satisfaction and professionalism, her expression unreadable. These men had mocked her, underestimated her, and treated her with blatant disrespect, and yet here they were, humbled and helpless, brought to their knees by the very dogs they had ridiculed. Sarah approached the leader of the group, who was still lying on the ground where Apollo had cornered him. His motorcycle lay abandoned nearby, its front wheel bent from the crash. Clutching his arm, the man winced as he tried to sit up. Sarah knelt beside him, offering a hand to help him to his feet. "Need a hand?" she asked, her tone neutral but not unkind. The man hesitated for a moment before accepting her assistance, muttering a quiet "thanks" as he struggled to stand. Once he was upright, Sarah stepped back and addressed the entire group. "Let me make one thing clear," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "These dogs aren't here to entertain you. They're highly trained professionals, capable of doing things most people can't even imagine. And yes, they're loyal companions, but they're also soldiers, just like I am." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Disrespecting me is one thing, but disrespecting them, that's unacceptable." Her speech hit its mark. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces flushed with shame. One of them spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're sorry," he said, looking at Sarah with genuine regret. "We didn't mean to cause trouble. We were just messing around, but we went too far." Sarah studied him for a moment, searching for sincerity in his expression. When she found it, she nodded slightly. "Apology accepted," she replied, "but actions speak louder than words. If you really mean what you're saying, prove it. Clean up the mess you left behind, respect the trails, and think twice before mocking someone based on assumptions." The bikers nodded eagerly, promising to do better moving forward. To show they meant it, they immediately began gathering the trash they had scattered earlier, filling bags with empty cans, wrappers, and other debris. Sarah watched them work, noting how their attitudes had shifted. Where once there had been arrogance and carelessness, there was now humility and effort. Even the leader, who had started the confrontation with such hostility, pitched in without complaint, working alongside his friends to restore the trail to its original state. As the cleanup progressed, Sarah took a moment to praise Apollo and Athena, kneeling beside them to give them affectionate pats and words of encouragement. "Good job, you two," she said softly, scratching behind their ears. "You handled yourselves perfectly." Both dogs wagged their tails happily, clearly proud of their accomplishment. Their bond with Sarah was evident in every glance and gesture, a partnership built on trust, respect, and countless hours of training. By the time the bikers finished cleaning up, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Exhausted but grateful, they approached Sarah one last time to thank her, not just for sparing them further embarrassment, but for teaching them a valuable lesson. "We won't forget this," the leader promised, shaking her hand firmly, "and we'll make sure our crew knows to treat people and animals with respect from now on." Sarah smiled faintly, appreciating the sentiment. "That's all I ask," she said. With that, she gathered her things and prepared to leave, calling Apollo and Athena to her side. As she walked away, the sound of retreating footsteps fading. Into the distance, the bikers stayed behind, reflecting on the day's events. What had started as a joke had ended as a life lesson, one they wouldn't soon forget. For Sarah, the incident reinforced everything she believed in: discipline, teamwork, and the power of leading by example. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would still be skeptics, doubters, and moments of frustration. But she also knew she wasn't alone. With Apollo and Athena by her side, she could face anything. Together, they had proven that true strength lies not in dominance or aggression, but in unity, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right. The story of Sarah Reeves and her dogs, Apollo and Athena, quickly spread throughout the small town. News traveled fast in such a close-knit community, especially when it involved something as dramatic as a group of arrogant bikers being humbled by two highly trained military dogs. By the time Sarah returned to her base later that evening, word had already reached her superiors. Her commanding officer called her into his office the next morning, not to reprimand her but to commend her for handling the situation with professionalism and poise. "Lieutenant Reeves," he began, leaning back in his chair with a proud smile, "I've heard about what happened out there. You turned a potentially dangerous confrontation into an opportunity to showcase the capabilities of our K9 unit. Well done." Sarah nodded modestly, crediting Apollo and Athena for their role in the incident. "They're the real heroes, sir," she replied. "Without them, none of this would have been possible." Her superiors weren't the only ones who took notice. Back in town, people who had once doubted Sarah's abilities now looked at her with newfound admiration. The local newspaper even ran a feature article about her, titled "Woman and Her: Dogs Teach Bikers a Lesson in Respect." Photos of Sarah training Apollo and Athena appeared alongside quotes from witnesses who had seen the chase unfold. One hiker described the scene vividly. "It was like watching a choreographed dance. Those dogs moved with such speed and precision. It was incredible." But perhaps the most surprising development came a few days later, when the same group of bikers returned to the trailhead where they had first encountered Sarah. This time, however, their demeanor was completely different. Gone were the smirks and jeers. Instead, they approached Sarah with genuine remorse written across their faces. The leader stepped forward, holding out his hand. "We wanted to apologize," he said, his voice sincere. "What we did was wrong, and we didn't realize how disrespectful we were being, not just to you, but to your dogs, too." Sarah accepted the apology graciously, though she remained cautious. She knew apologies could be easy to give but harder to follow through on. Still, she appreciated the gesture and decided to use the moment as an opportunity to educate them further. "Thank you for coming back," she said. "Apollo and Athena are more than just animals. They're partners. They've saved lives, tracked down criminals, and helped keep people safe. If you ever see someone else dismissing their work or underestimating them, I hope you'll speak up." The bikers nodded earnestly, promising to do better moving forward. To show their sincerity, they spent the rest of the afternoon helping Sarah clean up litter along the forest trails. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a tangible way for them to make amends and prove they meant what they said. As they worked together, Sarah noticed a shift in their attitudes. They asked questions about her training methods, expressed awe at the dog's skills, and even shared stories of their own experiences with pets. By the end of the day, they seemed almost eager to learn more about the world of canine handlers. Word of the bikers' change of heart spread quickly, earning Sarah even more respect in the community. People began approaching her wherever she went, thanking her for standing up to ignorance and showing grace in the face of adversity. Parents brought their children to meet her and the dogs, hoping to inspire the next generation to appreciate teamwork, discipline, and mutual respect. Local schools invited her to give talks about her career, and she happily obliged, using the platform to highlight the importance of treating others and animals with kindness and understanding. For Sarah, the entire experience reinforced why she loved her job so much. It wasn't just about training dogs or completing missions. It was about making a difference, no matter how small. Every interaction, whether positive or negative, was an opportunity to teach, inspire, or connect with someone new. And while she didn't seek recognition or praise, she couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that her actions had sparked meaningful change. As for Apollo and Athena, they became local celebrities in their own right. Their names were mentioned everywhere, from coffee shops to grocery stores, as symbols of loyalty, strength, and resilience. People often stopped Sarah during her walks to ask if they could pet the dogs, and she always agreed, reminding everyone to approach them calmly and respectfully. The bond between handler and dogs continued to grow stronger with each passing day, fueled by shared triumphs and unwavering trust. In the weeks that followed, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the town itself. Trailheads that had once been littered with trash were now clean and well-maintained, thanks in part to volunteer efforts inspired by the Bikers Cleanup Initiative. Signs promoting responsible behavior, such as Respect Wildlife and Pack it in, pack it out, appeared along popular hiking paths. Even the bikers, who had once disrupted the peace with their loud engines and careless attitudes, became advocates for preserving the natural beauty of the area. They organized regular rides to remote locations, bringing supplies to help maintain trails and clear debris. Through it all, Sarah remained humble, focusing on her mission rather than the attention she received. She knew that true strength wasn't about proving oneself to others. It was about staying true to one's values, no matter the circumstances. Whether she was training Apollo and Athena, responding to emergencies, or simply enjoying a quiet walk in the woods, she carried herself with dignity and purpose. Her story served as a reminder that respect is earned, not given, and that sometimes all it takes is a little patience and perseverance to turn skeptics into supporters. Years later, when Sarah reflected on that fateful day in the forest, she smiled at the memory. It wasn't the chase or the confrontation that stood out to her most. It was the ripple effect it created. A single act of standing firm against disrespect had touched countless lives, inspiring others to rethink their assumptions and embrace empathy. And as she watched Apollo and Athena play happily in the backyard, tails wagging and eyes bright with joy, she felt grateful for the journey that had brought them all together. Together, they had proven that strength comes not from dominance or aggression, but from unity, trust, and an unshakable belief in doing what's right.